it's me, Wise Papa Smurf. We're going to do a bit of a change up and do a solo episode today. It seems like everybody else had stuff going on. Zill had a meeting. Astros is on a date, so good for him. And, Danger's got the new baby, so, and Double Sniff's getting married. So, everybody's kind of got something going on. And I figured we didn't really have, today, or we didn't really have a guaranteed tomorrow going on because I have a t-ball game for my kid, so I want to go see that, and I figured we'll just get it in today. And I have some things to cover that were provided for me by Antemortem, so thank you, Antemortem. And some of these things I'll leave to talk about on the next show, but some of the things he talked about that we specifically haven't covered in some time are order of operations for a team fight. Like, where should you be standing? How should that look? Etc. So, the best way that I can say to do this is how you fight a team fight. And the reason that I don't often touch this question, because we get it a lot. I mean, we get how do I team fight a lot. And the reason I don't often touch this question is because that answer is super variable, and it's super dependent on your team's relative power and what it is your champions want to do, right? Do you have, if you had a team full of champions like Zareth, then either you're trying to blast from range, but you're not going to want to be in the mix, ever. But if you have somebody like Urgot, then you've pretty much guaranteed to be in the mix, right? So, even if you're ahead or whether you're behind or not, that's your role, is mixing it up and trying to do as much as possible to be either disruption or do damage or get your fear off or whatever. So, keep in mind, when I answer this question, I'm going to assume a couple of things. And the first assumption is that you know how to play your own champion, right? Which, may or may not be true given the how much familiarity you have with whoever it is you're playing, which is why we recommend kind of riding it out with one champion over many. But generally how this works, and this is the ballpark picture in a nutshell, not accurate to every team fight, but this is just to give you a baseline default. The way team fights will work is a tank will be up front. Behind the tank will be your mid-range DPS, and then your long-range DPS will be behind that. So, if you have an ADC, generally speaking, they're going to be behind the tank or in the very back, depending on what their range is. Your long-range DPS are people like Zareth or Lux. Even whenever I say long range, you should still be using your auto attacks at any point in any given fight to contribute damage. So you shouldn't be so far away that you're just lobbing abilities and that's that. Try to get in a little bit closer, and if the fight heats up, you can start fading backwards, but at least start somewhere where you're relevant, right? So tank line, mid-range DPS, then long-range DPS. Notice that I didn't include assassins anywhere in there. It's the assassin's job to circumvent the team fight, right? And try to wrap around, flank, get on the backside, do what you can to disable their backline, right? That is your goal, that's your objective. So if you think about it like a SWAT team, the guys in riot gear are kicking in the front door, and the assassin is the guy who's throwing the flashbang in through the window from the roof, right? He's going a whole different direction, and he's hoping to get off some surprise attack damage. So that is what assassins will do, and supports are generally, like I said, it depends on the support's role. If you're an engaged support or a pick support like Thresh or Blitz, you're going to be up there with the tank because you have to disrupt what it is they're trying to do. Either that, or you're going to stand back behind by your damage and peel, right? When do you do one versus the other? Well, if, and this again, we're all about relative positioning and relative power, right? So if your ADC is super strong, it is probably more beneficial for you to protect that ADC than it is for you to like get more in-depth catches on the enemy team, like create opportunity. It's more beneficial for you to prevent that ADC's death than it is for you to, cause additional damage. And a lot of people forget that. I mean, in low elo, that's probably the classic mistake that is made, is there's not any kind of emphasis on protecting your team. It's all about killing the other team. Which, if you have an ADC that's super fed and a mildly fed Rengar comes in, ADC's dead, right? So your fed ADC, you no longer have an advantage, and you'll probably end up losing the team fight. So, you need to measure, like, what is the damage to my team here, or what's the danger to my team here, and how do I prevent that if you're way ahead. If you're not ahead, or you're even, then you look for how can I best create an engagement that causes them to immediately suffer casualties. Because in low elo in particular, they won't try to get kills back. Well, actually, I take that back. One of two things will happen. They either won't try to get kills back and they'll be like, well, this is lost, and then they'll run away. That's option one. Or option two, they'll all in after they've already lost the team fight because, oh, well, we're fighting, right? In either scenario, you come out ahead. So your job is either to create that or to peel. And it depends on the impact of your ADC versus theirs, or versus their carrying threat, and who needs that protection, or if you should just create an engagement. Like if they have a stupidly fed, I don't know, fill in the blank champion, right? And like Echo, right? You've got to kill that Echo, and you have to CC him to death, or he'll ult and get all of his health back, and you have to kill him again, in which case you've already lost the team fight. So then your goal doesn't become peel for my ADC. My goal becomes lock down Echo so he doesn't rape my team, right? Like that's how this stuff kind of changes and adapts given the circumstance. But if Echo's not big, then your goal is, well, then I just got to protect my ADC, or I just got to create an engagement on somebody else that causes them to instantly pop, right? So that's where you should be, right? And it depends not on your position, like I'm mid, I'm top, I'm jungle, but on the style of your champion as to where you stand and how optimally that style is executed, right? So don't, like a lot of people want to be like, the ADC stands here, the mid laner stands here. Like that's just not true, right? And while we're talking about team fights, the one thing that, okay, I'm going to use a boxing analogy here. Whenever a boxer goes for a punch and they are positive they're going to land that punch and then they miss, their body will naturally overextend and they are open for a counter punch. What people don't realize in League is that counter punch exists. Like that opportunity exists. They just burned a whole bunch of cooldowns and maybe they killed somebody. But if you turn on them right now, you might be able to kill somebody in response, right? That is the opportunity recognition that is not really present as much in low elo, and in gold and plat it is present, but they don't know when to quit, right? Like there are times whenever you should be like, oh, they've burned all these important cooldowns, time to all in because we win the fight. Or like whether it's just, oh, we can counterburst this guy and kill him, but then we still need to leave until we get all of our stuff back, right? It's like almost like tug of war right? This is probably not a good analogy, but it's almost like tug of war, where you can make a like use all your strength to make a dramatic push, but then you're weak and you're kind of off balance, and they can pull not so hard and rip you forward, right? Or you can apply consistent pressure, but not get that dramatic yanking effect, right? If they blow a whole lot of cooldowns, think of that as like a hard pull on the rope, and it's going to leave them in a weakened state. So look to take advantage of that opportunity and don't leave the team fight until it's over. In fact, don't completely disengage the team fight until it's over, right? So what do I mean by that? What I mean is like if you drew circles around your champion of what that champion can do at max range, right? And you drew circles around everyone else's champion of what they can do max range. Like what's their maximum distance? And all those circles are imaginarily drawn on the screen. If you have like 100 health, you should not be in any of the other team's circles, or you'll probably die. But it's okay to stand just outside of those circles and try to lob in stuff when it's safe, or to enter the fight as they're trying to kill somebody else and maybe turn the tide, right? Because remember, they can only really kill like one person at a time. And I don't know how many times I have eked into or re-entered a fight at like 100 health and landed some abilities that freed up someone else, and like my Draven was able to lifesteal the couple of hits he needed to stay in the fight and kill everyone, right? But if I had just left, he's dead. So that is a huge thing about team fighting, that it's not like I'm all in or I'm all out in every team fight. Like I'm either in the middle of it or I'm 100 miles away and I'm recalling, right? You should never really leave until the thing is over. And you should also think about your health as a resource that you need to spend for your team to win a team fight. If you leave a team fight and you've taken no damage, like 0 damage, you've probably done something wrong. Either you were too far out of the fight, or you played the fight too safely, or you didn't commit auto attacks, or I don't know, but you've probably done something wrong if you leave a fight with 100% hit points. Okay. That being said, all that's on the table for ways in which you can improve a team fight, how to position in a team fight. But the biggest catch that kind of makes all this click into place is understanding when cooldowns are burned and what their approximate reuse timer is. Because when they don't have cooldowns, those are generally windows of relative safety for you. And the really good players dance in and out of those windows. So recognize that opportunity, utilize it, and your team fighting will improve, almost guaranteed. Right? Okay. Next thing, win conditions. Like, what is that? Well, like the first and foremost, and I feel like this goes without saying, but you blow up the damn Nexus. That is your win condition. That should always be your focus. If you can blow up the Nexus at any point in the game, you should be. And everybody's like, well, fucking duh, I get it. Everybody knows that. But so many times I see a team that they have like 15 seconds on, they've wiped the other team, they have 15 seconds on the death timer, and they don't go for Nexus turrets because they're like, we'll get another inhibitor. Why? You don't need all the inhibitors down to win the game. Actively think about prioritizing winning the game first. And you will have less instances where you could have ended and you didn't. Right? Like that is a huge point to climbing, particularly in like plat. So, it seems obvious, but it's not. I don't know how many. I mean, even good players do that kind of stuff like often, where they go, "Oh yeah, we could end here," right? But always be thinking like that is the number one goal, is ending the damn game. Period. That is your win condition as we blow up the Nexus. Okay. Another sneakier win condition is surrender. So, in League of Legends, and I can attest to this from my season this year, winning the game is as much taking a lead, growing it, and smashing it into the other team as it is destroying their will to play. Right? If you have a champion on your team that's just literally unfun to play against and is ahead, you would do well to make them really ahead. Because once they're untouchably huge, the enemy team will just surrender out of frustration. Like, that is a real way to win games. So, think about that. I know you can probably, if I said list off the top of your head 5 champions that are super stupidly frustrating to play against when they're ahead, you could probably do it. And if any of those champions are on your team, make sure they get ahead. Okay? Secondly, if anybody is ahead, make sure that their opponent has a miserable time. If you can grow the lead in like ganks or whatever, like any successful gank, I guarantee you this is said in chat. Oh, look at that. Their jungler ganks. My jungler's a worthless piece of shit. That always happens in like every ranked game ever. Somebody gets ganked, they start crying about how their jungler doesn't do anything. That demoralizes the enemy team. And demoralization wins more games than literally anything else. Or you can phrase it like this: toxicity loses more games than anything else. So create an opportunity for your opponents to be toxic. And that's easily done by exploiting cheap mechanics or cheap champions. Right? Okay. All chat. This is a double-edged sword in terms of toxicity ruining games. You are literally better off muting your entire team every game. It is rare that someone will say anything good to you. It's rare that any non-ping information typed into chat will be positive. And it's even more rare that you can turn around somebody who's in full tantrum mode by typing nice things to them. I know, I've tried. That being said, turn off chat. Just turn it the fuck off. It will not help you in any way, shape, or form. Mute all, play the game. You'll play better. Like, you will play better. And that information is not useful. And as much as it, like, some people really enjoy the act of, like, reading people's shit talk and cleverly responding to them, these are things that are unnecessary. It's time taken away from your gameplay, and it won't help you win the game at all. And if you're doing it, understand that, or if you're engaging in that activity, understanding that you are scratching an itch that is emotional, personal, and doesn't at all help your win rate. In fact, it hurts your win rate. So you're paying a price to engage the enemy team or your own team with dumbass horse shit. Stop paying that price if you want to climb. All right. Dragons, Baron, neutral objectives. When do these become a win con? Well, if you can stack enough dragons, they can be a pretty significant advantage. Baron becomes a win con. It's designed to be a win con in and of itself when you're trying to crack a base. I've gone into so many episodes on how to properly take dragon and how to properly take Baron, and the things that you really have to make sure, and this is going to again sound fairly obvious, but what? That your jungler is there. You need to have a jungler there, or else or someone with smite. Hell, you could have Zillion on your team, and if Kill Zill's there, you've got somebody. But you need to have somebody with smite, because that last secure is incredibly critical to taking important objectives, because the kill shot matters, not anything else. 2, you need to have good vision control of the area that you are taking the dragon or Baron in. And by that, I usually mean the other side of the pit, or the side of the pit where the enemy team is coming from. So if you're taking dragon and they're coming from blue buff, you need those two entrances warded at a bare minimum, like either side of blue buff. And then if you're on the other team and you're on the blue buff side team heading towards dragon pit, you need the back side of dragon pit warded. And if you can, you need to pop the blast plant before you start on the other side of the wall, so they can't use that blast plant to get over and flash out. If you do those things, the likelihood of you securing dragon goes way up. Baron, same thing, but you need to make sure, like, here's the thing that people do not account for in terms of Baron availability, right? If you count at any stage in the game how long it takes your team to kill Baron, right? Like, let's say, just start counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, and so on, so on, so on. If you count at any point and your team has reasonably high DPS, you will find that the Baron will go down in 15 to 20 seconds generally. Keep in mind, from Fountain, it takes like 15 to 20 seconds to get to Baron, walking. So if the enemy team has just recalled and you've watched them all just recall and you're near Baron, you can take it for free with virtually no danger because they can't get back in time to stop you, right? That is an available moment. You don't have to just have the enemy team killed in order to start Baron. Like, that's what everybody wants to do is, I got 2 or 3 catches and now we're starting Baron. Like, I mean, yeah, that's like a layup, but you can take a jump shot on this deal. You can do it whenever you just know that they don't have the travel time to get back, right? And a lot of teams will overextend for objectives and then have to, like, I don't know how many times I've seen a team take 3 towers when they should have taken 2, and because they took 3 and they don't have any resources left, they have to recall, and we can go straight to Baron and take it before they get off Fountain. Like, I've seen that happen so many times. So there are opportunities just available in travel time alone that often go kind of unexploited. And that can actually be a win condition for you to close out the game, to close those gaps, and to make sure that you win. Now, the other type of, those are like meta, like macro win cons. Micro win cons are also pretty important, right? Like, how do you win an engagement bot lane? Like, how do you, or I'm using bot lane, I know other people have other lanes or whatever, but what I'm going to talk about what I know in this real brief explanation. But like, let's say that I'm playing Pike, right? I'm playing Pike into a Thresh, right? The way that I know that I'm going to get my combo off and it's going to be effective is if I can lead with a Q while Thresh isn't able to counter Q me, or I know I can get my E off without Thresh flaying me out of path so I can get my stun, right? Like, that's how I win engagements. Or we do enough damage to somebody that I can just go in on them full burst and pop them with my ult and then they die, right? So knowing that, you need to plan your engagements to account for the skills that can screw you on it, right? Like, if you're going up against Morgana, you better have a plan for getting that black shield out of the way before you hard commit to the fight. Like, that's the only thing that you have to do. And that lane becomes incredibly boring if you don't make a plan. And whenever I see people say, I hate playing against Morgana because I can't do anything into her black shield, I'm like, that's because you're not accounting for it. Like with Thresh, here's an example. With Thresh, I usually max Q because that gives me the shortest cooldown on my hook. It lets me make the most plays in the early game. It gives me the most lane presence and pressure. But if I'm into a Morgana, I don't. Instead, I max my Flay. because that gives my auto attack the most magic damage, which means I can just walk up and pop their shield with auto attacks and then do my combos. And they're dead. The black shield's gone. Right? So I made an adjustment in how I would normally run my champion in order to execute something that I wouldn't normally be able to into a counter matchup. You need to be thinking like, how do I win my lane into a disadvantage? How do I play this fight? When I do this, what are they going to do? How do I bait that ability out so I can, drop my trap card or whatever, right? Like, that is the whole point, is pre-plan for what you know your enemies are going to do and catch them in a state of unpreparedness so you can capitalize. You be your own win con. And that's how you win lane, even into counter matchups. So be thinking about that. Not only winning the game in general, but winning your portion of the game. Because most of the time, most of the games that you have in your hands, and they win or lose based on your performance, is because you managed to get yourself ahead. Now, the myth is that just you getting yourself ahead means that you're good and you should be climbing. No, that means you're good at the early game, and if you still consistently fail, that means you need to step up your ability of transitioning your lead into a bigger one. Because you're probably taking unnecessary risks and squandering your lead, or you're walking beyond your coverage, or you're engaging poorly, or your team's letting you down. But that's not going to happen every single game, and that's never an excuse. So that being said, that's something you can look out for in order to improve your gameplay. This next one I'm going to mention, and it's, again, this is a topic we don't get often into the show, or get into often into the show, because it is so dependent on relative strengths of champions, what your team knows how to do, how to execute it, when to be in front, when to be in back, when to push, when not to push. But that is split pushing. It is an extremely viable strat. Now, I have heard over and over and over and over and over and over, like 100,000 times, oh man, Wise Pop Smurf, you can win the game in bronze, just split push your balls off, and nobody ever even has the map awareness to stop your split push, and you just win the game. That is incredibly not true. The reason that is not true, or that I feel that that's a bad plan, is because in 99.99% of the time, all the way up into low diamond, your team doesn't have the map awareness to not get engaged on while they're 4v5. Because what'll happen, and you'll notice this if you're a split pushing champion, bronze, silver, gold, or plat, is that you will be split pushing, even correctly so, especially correctly so. And you will do your job, and your team will die, and then you'll get a whole bunch of MIA pings right on top of your head, like, where the fuck were you, dumb fuck? And your team will be super pissed that you weren't there. And in fact, you're never there. And fuck you, we could win this game if it weren't for your dumbass. Okay. Remember, I said tilt is a win condition and it's a loss condition. That doubly applies to split pushing, because people naturally want to place blame on anywhere that is not them in any game. So even if you're doing the right thing, it will not matter in the eyes of your team, and then they will play worse for it. So there is an implicit cost in split pushing when it is not done properly, and the way in which you can do that is to specifically warn your team ahead of time. I'm warding out, I'm going for the split push bottom, keep them interested, but don't get engaged on. If you do that, you're free to split push. They won't get as mad at you because even when it blows up, you at least warned them. The worst you're going to get out of it is, oh, come on, man, this idea isn't working. We got a team fight, which may or may not be true, but still, you are at least covered and you're not the guy being the asshole. How to properly split push. First off, you need a champion that's capable of doing it. if you have a champion like Tryndamere, Fiora, whatever, any kind of duelist, duelists generally are super capable of split pushing. You need the ability to wave clear quickly if your champion doesn't already have that. For a lot of melees, this means building like a Tiamat. Tiamat will help you clear waves ridiculously fast if you're like Fiora or Tryndamere, any of the auto attack spammers. Olaf, whatever. But you also, with Olaf, have an axe. With Tryndamere, you have a spin. So there's options there, right? And then there's also the people that are like Singed, where you need items to split push effectively, right? Because Singed, you've pushed the minion wave in, that's super great, but your attack speed is donkey balls, so it's pretty hard for you to take down a tower. So what I would suggest is, some champions rely on things like ZZ Rot to help take down towers, and that may be you depending on which champion you pick. Right, so if you need that item, you should probably get that item, right? So all that said, you've picked a champion, you're capable of split pushing. How do you do it? To split push properly, there has to be pressure somewhere else on the map. That's the number one requirement of split pushing. You have to have a team that is creating pressure, because pressure is opportunity. Pressure forces a decision to be made by the enemy team, and that decision is either to commit to you or to commit to the pressure that your team is applying. In either scenario, if they don't play it perfectly, you win. If they commit 3 people on you and the team is up against is a 4-on-2, that's fantastic. They go, they kill everybody, they take a tower. Done. You did it, right? So the downside of pressure is that you have to be able to control, or at least foresee, the enemy team's response. How do you do that? Brings us up to the second requirement of split pushing, and that's awareness. You have to be aware of your map constantly while you're split pushing. In fact, it's more important than paying attention to clearing the minion waves. Is literally, you sleep with one eye open, gripping your pillow tight, looking at the mini-map. That's what you do. You have to have enough word coverage in important places that give you enough fair warning, right? Like, for example, if I'm split pushing past second tier turret top, right, and I'm past the red buff, right, a ward on the red buff, like on that bush by the red buff, the banana bush that curves around the edge, that's a good ward, but it doesn't give me relevant information, because by the time I spot someone with that ward, I'm already dead, right? If somebody is coming from the bush by raptors, I'm probably already dead if I haven't seen that person, because if they run at an angle and I try to run backwards, I'm already pinched. So you need to see, not only with enough room to avoid the person, but with enough room and enough advanced notice to escape the position you are in without dying. Because if you do die, you're giving up pressure, and hopefully your team's in a position to capitalize on it. But this is literally one of the hardest things to master in League of Legends. And to be completely honest, I would advise avoiding it, because even if you are capable of solo executing a perfect split push, your team is not capable of not getting fucked on for 2.5 minutes. Plus, you put your team in a scenario where they have to march to the beat of your drum, and a lot of teams will revolt under those circumstances, go toxic, and start feeding. Until you reach a level that people understand how to play with the split push, I wouldn't be focusing on a split push centric strategy, because you will generally fail and give up more than you gain. Right? But those games where you like solo blast the Nexus are fucking cool. It's just really, really hard to get there. So, okay. lane swapping is like split pushes illegitimate brother. So when do we lane swap and when do we not? Right? If you have butt blasted your lane and you're so far ahead that it's ridiculous and they're super weak, you can lane swap at that point and bring your top laner down and your bottom lane goes top. The reason for this is that your lane will suppress their top lane while continuing to get big. Their bottom lane, who's weak as shit, will have a difficulty suppressing your top lane because hopefully your top lane's not like frail, and actually, didn't eat paste for the first 10 minutes of the game. So if that's the case, it creates a pressure vacuum where you're extending your lead not on someone who's already hopelessly behind, but on someone else on the map that will crumble under that pressure, right? You still have to play it well. Just because you're ahead doesn't mean you're invincible. Because remember, ADCs are made out of like eggshells and, I don't know, some soft fruit. Bananas. Eggshells and bananas. It's all easily breakable outsides and incredibly squishy insides. So there you have it. Be protective. Hold them in a nice spoon. Keep them alive. Don't let that fall. That being said, if you do this, your top lane, you should be looking to call in your jungler because a top lane and a jungler can usually win a 2v2 against an ADC and a support. But that is also true of you, unless their top lane is dramatically underfed as well, in which case, you should be looking to zone them out completely. Remember, okay, so again, I've mentioned a concept and I should now go into that. So what zoning is and what that means is you position yourself in a way that for the enemy to get any benefit from the wave, whether it's CS or experience or whatever, they have to fight you for it, right? Like you're positioned beyond their minions and you're farming backwards, and then to get to those minions, they have to get through you, and that's a fight that they're going to lose. So they will instead stay away from you and forfeit the experience and forfeit the gold and get nothing. And you do that until you build a big enough wave that you can crash it into tower, and then you have an opportunity to kill their top laner under tower and deny them all that EXP and tower damage while you're at it. So these are ways in which you take a lead and then snowball it into something bigger and more out of control and create such an imbalance in the game that it becomes an irrecoverable deficit. Right? Like that's how you strangle out a game. Like that's how you win hard. So lane swapping can create that because you get more towers on the map and then you roam around to finish off other towers. Basically, you'll feel the pressure when you go up against someone and you're like, damn it, this fill in the blank champion is fucking everywhere. That's somebody who's allocated their lane pressure well. That's somebody who's allocated their lane presence well. And that's the exact type of thing that you need to do when you're considering lane swapping. I've seen people lane swap for no reason, just because, it's a thing to do. And it can create huge deficits if done incorrectly. So in order to pull off a lane swap, you not only need to know the theory behind it, but how to effectively execute it, how to zone people off, how to do all these things properly, or else you're just going to end up behind, or more behind than you would if you just kept smashing the other idiot. Okay. This is the last one. I'm going to leave one of these because I think we can get a whole episode out of pressure and tempo. I know I could talk about it for a whole episode, but the last one I'm going to talk about is a freeze. Because a freeze goes directly into what I'm talking about with zoning. Because most of the time when you zone, you are freezing the lane in order to execute that zone. So, what is a freeze? How is it executed? What do I mean? Okay, so whenever you freeze, it means that you are taking the minion wave and trying to do as little additional damage as possible in order to prevent the wave from moving any further or further back in the lane. Basically, they stay crashed, the two waves stay crashed into each other wherever they are in the lane. And that's usually right outside your own turret, right? Freezes are incredibly difficult to sustain because if you accidentally over damage, even one auto attack can throw the wave out of balance. There's also the rules of plus or minus of how many minions you need in addition to your normal wave in order to sustain a freeze at a certain point past the dead-ass center in the river. And if you are looking for a more in-depth guide on freezing and lane control, I know there was a top laner, I think it was Rafflegator, who did a series on that was probably the best done series that I've seen. But it's searchable on YouTube and you can find it. It's a top lane Renekton player that really did a good job at explaining exactly how to execute a freeze, but I will give you the nutshell right now. The key is don't damage minions until they are already going to die to other minions. In other words, let the caster minions' little magic missiles float towards their target, and while they're in the air, and that would be a kill shot, then you shoot. Because you're actually wasting their auto attacks, and then you're killing their target, right? Which actually slows the progression of the fight. The more you shoot, the more you engage. If you shoot the enemy team, the minion wave stops aggroing the minions that they're fighting, and they acquire you as a target, which causes a push. These things are issues for wave control, and they are not accounted for at any elo lower than diamond. You don't see wave control in plat, you don't see wave control in gold, you don't see wave control ever in anything below that, ever. I mean, they just push or last hit, whatever, at random. There's no thought about the minion wave going into play. It's just a non-factor on the game. But when properly executed, those kind of freezes can result in a tremendous advantage in both EXP and gold and CS lead and whatever, if you actually properly execute them. A trick to creating a freeze is to stand in front of your minion wave and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, which body blocks the minions and it causes them to clump so they acquire the same or similar target. It's harder than it used to be to do, but it's still doable. That causes a freeze in your favor because your minions will, basically there's a focus fire effect. Another thing that you can do is do that to the enemy minions by standing in front of them, letting them acquire you, and then letting them chase you into the bush. They will unacquire you and then engage your minion wave in mass, which causes that minion wave to push into you. Right? But that's before the minion waves collide, because if they collide, you're too late. Okay? If you can do this, you can literally lock an opponent out of EXP if you're ahead of them. You can make them fight you if you're at a position of relative strength in the game, right? This is a mechanic that if you do not understand it, you need to look it up and you need to learn how to use a freeze, right? So when do you freeze and when do you push? You freeze when you're inherently stronger than the other team and you can force them into a situation where they don't do anything for a period of time. If they just wait for you to finish off the wave while all of your minions are dying to theirs, they're gaining nothing and you're gaining everything. And the deficit between your power levels just increases and increases and increases in your favor for the longer that goes on. Now, conversely, if they are out of lane and you need to go back to spend your money, you can hard shove your minions into the tower so that the tower kills their minions, and if you're fast enough, it will actually clear all the minions and both waves will reset in the exact center, so you can get your freeze kind of started again there, or allow the other wave to kind of push into you. Because remember, at every elo below diamond 4 or 3, nobody's thinking about lane control. They just kind of do whatever. They shoot minions, right? If they shoot minions, that's an opportunity for you. It also makes you more gankable, so that the jungler comes in and gets more kills on your lane partner or lane opponent. That's fantastic for you. That's exactly the scenario that you want to be in. So minion and wave control and freezing when it's appropriate or hard shoving when it's appropriate can create huge windows for you. And literally every time you recall, this needs to be going through your mind is, okay, do we hard shove the minions to try to recall or do we not? Whether you are allowed to back in a lane without losing too much is almost entirely a decision made on where the wave is and where your enemy opponents are, and what the respective power levels are between the two of you. It's inherently complex, and if you're just kind of backing whenever, you're creating windows where your opponent can actually catch you in strength, and that's not something that you ever want to do. Additionally, with tower plates being a thing, it is more important than ever to time your wave pushes with your backs. Because if you clear out a wave and let it go into their tower, they have to clear that wave. Then the next two waves are going to meet somewhere in the middle. They have to clear that wave. And by the time they do both of those things, you'll likely be coming right back into tower as the wave hits. So you can regain that CS and not lose it to tower, not lose the experience, not lose the gold. So these are things that you should be thinking about with your back timings. These are things that you should be thinking about with your freezing and your pushing, and everything kind of clicks together in that magical sort of way that whenever I say the difference between silver and plat is a whole series of small things, these are the kind of small things that I am exactly talking about. Okay. I think that's a good point to stop. I've gone on for about 50 minutes with very little material. That being said, if you guys have any questions, if you want to follow up on this, hit me up. We can do some coaching or something like that. I don't mind to help anybody try to get a handle on their game and how to improve it. I know the other guys do that too. I know Astros has been doing that. And, I know Doubles picked up a couple here or there. I mean, maybe not right now because the dude's getting married, so cut him a break. But, I know that he's been doing some stuff here or there too. And so that is actually something that hopefully is very helpful to the community at large. And we do that just because. That's the whole goal, is we want to help you guys get better. The second thing is check out our YouTube videos on all of our coachings and find somebody who's approximately your elo, maybe approximately in your role, and watch some of those coaching videos, because I'm sure that there are going to be good takeaways for you that will click and make you get better and understand kind of the thought process of like a higher elo mentality on looking at all the same things that you're doing and maybe discovering some of the opportunities that you just didn't know were there, because that's how you get better at League. All right, now Patreon. You guys have been awesome to us on Patreon. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to look in the near future to do something to try to give back, maybe a tournament or something like that. I'll have to talk to Zill to see when he's available to run another one of those. But I really appreciate you guys' generosity. We've all got these new sweet Yeti mics, which coincidentally I don't think I'm using right now. I'm just using my headset because I went quickly. But it's really cool that you guys appreciate and support us enough that I don't have to pay out of pocket to keep the website up. I don't have to pay out of pocket for our hosting and server costs. And, we can pay an audio editor to come in and, clean up our episodes and put them on the air. And, all that is thanks to you guys. I really appreciate it. And, you guys don't have any idea how much that means to me. Also, if we get up to $400 or $500, we could probably get Astros to get a LOLA tattoo, which I think would be hilarious. So yeah, let's do that. But I'm looking to give back to the community. So keep your ears open on the podcast, or shoot us ideas of things that you guys would like to do as a community prize or giveaway or something like that we can do for you guys to thank you for your support, because I think that's legit and it's important to us, and I really appreciate everybody who gives a little out of what they do to support us, because we try to do this for nothing, and getting something back even like that, just voluntarily, like donations, really means a lot, because it's you guys really appreciate what we're doing. So thank you again, Patreons. I appreciate that. To all you who aren't Patreons, thank you guys too for listening. Tell your friends. I'd like to have more listeners, have more people in the community, and really grow our Discord out so we have more people playing. Lately, there has actually been an influx of people joining the Discord, which is super cool. I'm really excited about that. So let's keep that alive and keep that trend growing. Thank you to Deluxe for potentially adopting one of my cats that I'm trying to get rid of. That's awesome. Didn't expect that on the podcast. But if anybody else wants a kitten and I can figure out how to send them one, still got plenty. Other than that, and thank you guys for your support. I already said that. And I don't know that we have any more events or announcements that I can think of off the top of my head. Wish Astros good luck on his date. Also, thank you guys. I got an email about movies that Zill needs to watch, suggested films that Zill should take advantage of. I already read those to him, but I'll just go down the list of what was sent in. And by the way, I apologize. It was a Ferrari, not a Corvette, that was wrecked in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's cinematically inaccurate. Shame on me. The first one was Back to the Future, was a suggested movie for Zill to watch. Beverly Hills Cop, E.T., Top Gun, Days of Thunder, Friday, Kingpin, Gremlins, and Footloose. So these are classic movies that have been suggested. They also wrote in. They love to listen to this show and believe our cast actually synergizes pretty well. I like the shit you guys give each other, and the banter between casters makes me laugh. I also think that Astros and Ponderous aren't that bad. I used to listen to Ponderous's podcast even. Keep up the great work, and can't wait to hear the next episode. Thanks, Key, for your suggestions. I appreciate that. If you guys have any more movies that we can hopefully get Zill to Netflix, so we can actually get him some kind of a cinematic understanding of basic movie history, that would be great, because I'm a little tired of all of my great references falling on deaf Amish ears. So let's figure out how we can bring him into this century. Thanks, guys, for your help, and I hope you all enjoyed the solo episode. I know it's not, the normal thing, but didn't really have anybody else to come with me this week, so all right. Good night, everybody!